All right, great. So yeah, I'm Andrew Paolucci. I'm the Assistant State Soil Scientist here with the NRCS in Madison, and I'm also the Soil Health Specialist. And one of the new roles that I've recently taken on too, because my boss just took a new position, is being the Acting State Soil Scientist. So you can imagine I've got a lot going on right now. But yeah, I've been in Madison for about 2 months. Before that, I was in California, mainly doing soil survey, which is soil mapping and inventory that the NRCS does as well. So if you ever want to talk about soil survey, if that's interesting to you at all, feel free to contact me in that respect. But my objectives today for this presentation is just give you a brief history of the NRCS and then discuss soil health as it relates to conservation planning. Like I said, my previous job was with soil survey. You can see over at the right, that was one day when I was going out and mapping soils. I was mapping soils in private lands, mostly rangelands, national parks, and a lot of other places in the Sierra Nevada. So it was a really cool job. I got to see a lot of soils, but my previous job wasn't really related to conservation planning, where this new position that I just took on is. And this picture down in the bottom left is a field that I was actually standing in yesterday, where a farmer is really implementing a kind of crazy idea that is a soil health practice. You can see he has both corn and soybean growing in the same field, and that's promoting diversity, which is one of our four soil health principles. So like I said, I want to give you a brief history of the NRCS. I know this slide's a little overwhelming and there's a lot of dates in there. I honestly wish I could have put 10 more because there's a lot of really cool stuff in the history when you dive into it. So starting at the beginning, around 1899, the soil survey program was launched, and really the leader was Milton Whitney. He's one of the fathers of soil survey in that respect. I think in 1901 was the first Congress mandated soil survey, where they mandated government employees to actually go out and collect soils data. And it was interesting that that first mandate was done for tobacco lands. And a funny fact is that Milton Whitney was really known for being a cigar smoker. He was never seen without a cigar in his mouth. And a funny quote that I found in the literature from another surveyor working with Whitney was that when he smoked a cigar, he could identify the soil type on which the tobacco had grown. Really don't believe that, but I thought it was a really funny quote. So I thought including that was a good thing. So anyway, around 1928, another really important soil scientist that made a big impact on conservation, who was working for the Bureau of Soils doing soil survey, published a document called The Soil Erosion: A National Menace. And everybody knows, or most of you should know, that the Dust Bowl occurred around the 1930s. So everybody in the Midwest was really seeing this degradation of their soils, and people started thinking about, hey, can we do something about this? And one of those people was FDR. He made soil and water resources a national priority and established the Soil Erosion Service, which Hugh Hammond Bennett was the leader for, the first chief. The cool fact too is that there was actually, and it's kind of scary, is that there was a large dust storm that occurred during the Dust Bowl in the Great Plains, and it actually carried sediment and soil all the way to DC and 300 miles out into the Atlantic. And in fact, in 1935, there was another dust storm that hit Washington, DC, just as they were discussing a soil conservation policy. So people all around the country were seeing the effects of the Dust Bowl. And so we really started thinking about conservation at that time. Around 1935, the Soil Conservation Service was formed. It was transferred from the Department of Interior to the USDA. And in around 1950s, I think this is a really important fact, is that the Soil Conservation Service started providing technical and financial assistance to farmers, such as assistance with cover cropping. A lot of people think cover crops are a new thing, but really we've been doing it for a long time. And maintaining soil cover, which is one of our soil health principles, is something that has been implemented since the time of the Dust Bowl. And in fact, there was also another kind of mini Dust Bowl in the 50s, and they really saw how conservation practices protect the soil from wind erosion. Later on, around 1994, the Natural Resource Conservation was formed from the Soil Conservation Service, and that's because we really broadened our mission. We weren't just concerned with soil conservation. We were interested in water quality, watershed planning. So it really just related to natural resources conservation. So we took on a new name, and we've kept that ever since. So again, talking about the history, I just wanted to talk about the definition of soil health and how it's changed over time. People have been talking about soil fertility before we even had written text. So we don't really know, but we see it on the landscape. We have Native American populations in New England that were seeking out silty soils for their agriculture because they were more highly productive. So we know people were thinking about it. The first text was probably recorded about 4,000 years ago with the Chinese, and then again maybe about 2,500 years ago with the Roman Empire. So there has been a long outstanding interest in soil fertility, and that's transitioned over time into today's definition, which is soil health. In between there, we started thinking about soil capability classes and land capability. That's what this figure down at the bottom is showing you. The difference between that and soil health is that soil capability or land capability is looking at land use potential based on the inherent properties of the soil and the landscape, the properties that don't change, where soil quality and soil health are really focused on both the inherent and the dynamic properties and really include the interaction with humans. So on the right, you can see today's definition. This is what we put on our website and our fact sheets. It's the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living system that sustains plant, animal, and human health. And you can see I put continued capacity, and Johanna really hit this on the head, that that's our main goal, is continued sustainability and to promote soil functions rather than just crop productivity. And I also just want to point out that soil health and soil quality are synonymous. The reasoning between the name change, I think, happened in the 1990s, and that was due because if you think about soil quality and compare it to like water quality or air quality, whereas air quality and water quality are really, when people hear those words, they're thinking about how much pollution is in the air, where soil quality is something much more than that. It's thinking about our interactions, what we want the soil to provide, and how we want it to be sustainable. So today, everybody knows one of the reasons we're on this talk is that soil health is a really interesting and popular issue that people want to talk about. This is a graph showing the trends in the Google searches if you look at soil health as a topic. Just to explain the graph, a value of 100% means that the topic is most interesting or most searched for, whereas a value of 50 is meaning that topic is half as popular. So within the last 10 years, you can see this increase in popularity within the topic soil health within this Google search. So I gave you guys the definition, but really the important thing about soil health, and the first thing I usually show people, are the 4 soil health principles. There used to be 5, they kind of changed it around. We get this guidance from the National Soil Health Division, but these are the 4 soil health principles. Maximize continuous living roots, minimize disturbance, maximize soil cover, and maximize biodiversity. And you can see kind of examples of each of practices that we use to address each one of those principles. But overall, our goal is to try to mimic nature. We know nature in some way was sustainable. We see these habitats that we're able to maintain for hundreds and thousands of years. So we're trying to replicate that with our land. So how do we do that? How do we address soil resource concerns? We work as an agency with the farmers and the land managers to find solutions to address both their needs and the needs that benefit the environment. I was also really glad that Johanna brought this up. We're really trying to help the farmers and help address the resource concerns. And finding that common ground is, I think, why we're successful as an agency. You guys might know we're non-regulatory. We can't go in and tell a farmer he has to cover crop. So we rely on participation from the farmers and working with them rather than against them. This is a picture that I took yesterday at a farm. where at that same farm where I took the picture of the corn and the soybeans, where they're implementing a conservation practice. Here they planted rye, cereal rye as a cover crop, and then they interseeded soybeans in between, and they jerry-rigged this combine to be able to harvest or cut down the rye without disturbing the soybeans. So they're applying that soil health principle of biodiversity and keeping the soil covered rather than having bare rows in between the soybeans. So these are the types of things we ask a farmer first when we step on their land. What do they want the soil to provide? Do they want to just increase their productivity? Do they want to benefit the water quality in the stream next door? What is their goal? And I won't list all of these, but I just want to get you familiar with some of the things that we work with farmers to address. And this is that same field that I showed you with the combine harvesting with those interseeded soybeans and the adjacent cereal rye. So you can see it kind of at a different stage of development. And you can see high residue on the soil surface. That's another really good soil health practice. So I'll just really want to quickly show you this. What soil do you think is functioning, the one on the left or the one on the right? And which one would the landowner prefer to have? Obviously, he doesn't want this erosion happening. He's losing his soil material and affecting his crops. And maybe we can find a solution such as the one on the right where we can grass an area like that, and then he can harvest it for feed for his animals. So it's a win-win situation. He's addressing this resource concern and he's providing feed for his cattle and his income. So these are a list of resource concerns. I listed all the soil ones. There's a lot more water and plant resource concerns, and then I didn't even go into animals and air and energy, but I just wanted to highlight some of the resource concerns that occur related to soil health. Whenever we think about resource concerns, because of our history of our organization, we like to think about erosion, but you can see down in the bottom left, this soil doesn't really have an erosion problem. It's flat, it's got cover, but it does have some sort of problem. This water isn't infiltrating, and it's probably due to something like compaction from tillage. So this is another thing when we're walking out in a field with a farmer, we're asking, what do they want their soil to provide? And then we're also locating what are the resource concerns here that we can address. I won't spend too much time on this. This is the 9-step conservation planning process. I just wanted to show you it, and I will dive into it if we do another longer presentation, but this is the process a conservationist works through with a landowner, where in phase 1, they're identifying those problems, identifying those objectives, inventorying resources, and then phase 2, they're making the decisions, and then phase 3, they're implementing and evaluating the plan. And I'm hoping Francisco would join in and talk about soil health assessments, because we do those in both stages of phase 1 and phase 3. The soil health assessment is where we kind of go out on the land and look at the soil health, and then we'll implement a practice and try to see if it had any benefits. The big problem and one of the misconceptions of soil health is that it happens overnight or within a couple growing seasons, and really that's not the case. So evaluating the plan is really hard. A lot of times we only have a 1 or a couple year contract with the landowner. We're not going back in 50 years and seeing, hey, did this work? And that's one of the downsides of our agency and something we're really working on. I just really wanted to quickly mention the main 2 programs our agency uses to implement soil health practices are EQIP and CSP. I'm not even going to read this. I just wanted to show you this graph really and just show you, this is showing acres of cover cropping practice from the EQIP fund pool. So you can see in 2019, we cover cropped 300,000 acres. And that's just what we worked on with landowners in Wisconsin. That's not counting the people that are cover cropping on their own. And that's like 1/3 the size of Rhode Island. That's a huge area. So we're pretty successful at implementing practices with landowners. And really the big difference between these 2 programs is the first one, EQIP, it's applying practices that address resource concerns. And the second one, it's applying enhancements that build on your already existing practices. So I guess overall, my perspective on soil health as a conservationist is that soil health is something that NRCS has been implementing since its early beginning. and conservation is best accomplished through cooperation with farmers. And I'll leave you with this quote from Hugh Hammond Bennett. And here's my resources.